For me, freedom is an escape. Freedom is escaping from something. There is no freedom without escape. Now? What I try to write in my books is a kind of anthropology of escape. It's a kind of way to understand how escape can be a way to understand humankind and how people act. It's the detachment from something. It's going further from something you were doomed to be, or doomed to have, or doomed to experience. And in a way, all my books deal with this issue. Not only about me, but also my mother, my father, my brother. I don't know why I find it very stimulating to come back to this same aspect again and again. And the aspect I want to go back to is this aspect of escape. And in writing my books, I came to realize it more and more, because for so long in my childhood, I thought that I was the only one who wanted to escape. You know, I was this gay boy in this village in the north of France, and I had no choice but to escape, because people were telling me, you are different, you don't belong here, you shouldn't be here. And I had to escape. And at some point, I thought that I was the only one who wanted to escape, that the other ones didn't want. They wanted to stay where they were. And the more and more I wrote, the more and more I realized my mistake, and that I was wrong, and that the story of my childhood, and possibly the story of humankind, is this kind of chaos of attempt to escape. My brother tried to escape, but he didn't have the tools to escape. The only thing he had was alcohol. And in drinking and drinking and drinking, he was trying to escape his fate, his life. But because he tried to escape, he died at 38 years old from alcohol. One day he collapsed in his kitchen and he was dead. But he died not because he wanted to stay where he was. He died because he wanted to be somewhere else. Homosexuality was my tool to escape. Because first it was a condemnation. I was condemned to escape because of my homosexuality, because I didn't fit in, because I wasn't accepted. And later on, this condemnation became a tool for my escape. It became a tool to reinvent myself outside of my past, outside of my family, to build new communities, new bonds. It's what led me to read literature in the first place. I wanted to read to find people like me, understand people like me, find people who had the same secret desire that I had in my childhood. A gay childhood is a very strange thing. What it is to hide a secret every day, you know. You play with the other kids and you hide your secret. You walk down the street and you hide your secret because you are careful of not walking in a feminine way, in a gay way. You speak and you hide your secret. You talk to your parents and you hide your secrets. It's a very strange kind of childhood. And this pushes you to later on try to understand why you had to hide this secret. And maybe there were other people like you, other people who experienced the same. So yes, in a way, homosexuality was my privilege. And it makes the notion of privilege much more complex and nuanced that we tend to do today, nowadays. Because in fact, my brother had more privileges than me as a straight guy, because he was not bullied, he was not ashamed of his desire, he didn't have to hide, people wouldn't spit on him at school. But this heterosexuality was condemned him not to escape. I wanted to break free from the old-fashioned way of telling the story of an outsider. And very often in literature or in cinema, The outsider is portrayed as someone who is more free than the others, more sensitive than the others, more sensitive to arts or to readings or to theater or I don't know what. And that's why this person escaped. And I wanted to tell the story the other way around. I wanted to tell a story in which I escape, not because I am more free than the others, but because I am less free than the others. And this lack of freedom pushes me to emancipate myself. And once again, it makes the whole conversation much more complex. Sometimes the absence of freedom is the key to your freedom. And sometimes your power is what destroys you. And this is also what I've been talking about in Flygte, the book about my mother. My mother escaped because she was less free than my father, not because she was more free. Because as a woman, the men around her, the whole society, the whole social class she was living in, and my father was telling her, you have to stay at home, you have to cook, you have to raise the kids, you have to clean the house, you have to go shopping for the food. And one day she was able to say, now I'm going to take back what this society took from me. But my father, as a privileged person, as someone who was able to do whatever he wanted to do. He didn't have a woman telling him you should stay at home and raise the kids. He had the privilege of masculinity, but this privilege later on destroyed him. And he couldn't try to get back his lost freedom because he didn't know that he lost his freedom. And so that's what my books are about also. This extreme circulation and complexity of the relationships between dominant and dominated, privilege and absence of privilege, freedom and lack of freedom. All of those are not simple, and their meaning can completely change in the course of one's life. I was fed up to hear people talking about freedom as a symbolic thing. You have to free yourself, you have to emancipate yourself, you have to free your mind, you have to think differently. Freedom is not symbolic. Freedom is material. This is what I've been writing in Flygte about my mother escaping an abusive man. And when I see what it was for my mother to escape a man who was drinking every day and insulting her and being violent with her, the only way for her to escape that man was to be able to pay for a house far from that man, to take a train, to go far away from that man. How many women in their life cannot escape because they don't have that possibility? So yes, what I'm trying is to probably re-inject Marxism in the question of freedom today and get rid of the bourgeois symbolization of freedom. The world of my childhood was a world of circulation of violence. It was like in a Greek tragedy. Violence was circulating between peoples and bodies. My father was suffering from his life at the factory and his poverty, and he was extremely tough with my mother. And my mother was suffering from my father and everything he was doing to her. And she was tough with her children, with me, with my brother. And violence was circulating like this, like an electric current. Violence is not something that you own. Violence is not like your car or your home or your purse. It's something that crosses you. It's something that uses you. It's something that uses your body. And it's a sociological rule that we all know in our lives. It's because it's also an individual rule. Sometimes you have a bad day at work, things are going bad, and you go back home and you are aggressive with someone you love because you are so stressed out. And then you don't understand why you were like that. You feel guilty. And why do you feel guilty? Because this guilt is the evidence that this violence crossed you. Was not your violence, but the violence was using your flesh, your hands, your mouth. This is what I This is the way I see violence, and this is the way I try to portray violence in my books. Not as something that suddenly people apply, but something that crosses. And my childhood was a story of that. And then it asks the question, how do we cut the violence? The same way that we cut an electric current. I have seen it so many times in my life that if you change the context of a person, the violence of the person cease and stop. It's not, I mean, except a few exceptions like psychopath and serial killer. People don't wake up thinking, okay, I'm going to be violent today. It's something else. It's much more complex than that. And very often, if you pull the violent person outside of the situation, this person will cease to be violent, you know. How many people, at a much more violent level than in my family, but how many people were fascist in Italy during fascism because they had the political structure. And then when the political structure collapsed, they become the little bakery owner again. It doesn't mean that they are wonderful people. But then their violence cannot be applied anymore because the context has changed, because the situation has changed. And at a completely different level and lower violence, it's what I saw with my mother. You know, when I was a child, my mother was a very dark person. She was a very aggressive person, telling me, why do you talk like a faggot? Why are you like that? Why can't you be normal? And I hated her. And then when she got rid of my father, one day she took all the stuff of my father, she put it in a garbage bag, she threw them through the window, and she told him to never come back. And when I saw her after that, she was a completely different person. And suddenly I realized that her violence was the continuation of the violence that she was enduring at home with my father. So it's very difficult to change a person, you know. If I look at you in the eyes and I tell you what you do is bad, you should change, then you will not change, you know. That's why parents always fail with their children. You don't change people like that. But if you change the structures, if you change the context, and if you change the situation, then you change people. It's easier to change the world than to change one person. Because if you change the world, people in this world will individually change. And we've seen it in history. We've seen it. When you change the political structure, you change the people. And so that's why there is a deep connection between changing a situation and transforming an individual. For so long, my mother was suffocating from her life. It was also killing so many possibilities as an individual in her. She didn't have time for empathy. She didn't have the luxury of empathy because she was there at home, cleaning, raising the kid, living with a man who was telling her, you're fat, you're ugly, making fun of her. And I remember soon after my mother broke with my father, she was with her grandson, the son of my sister. She was in the street with him, and they had spent a few days together. And the kid was about to come back to his family with his mother, with my sister. And when my mother told me he's about to leave, suddenly she started crying. And I never had seen her being so tender in my childhood. And I realized that to break from the violent situation that she was stuck in for so many years was suddenly making possible so many emotions, so many aspects of humanity that were buried under violence for so long. So the fight for revolution is also a fight for tenderness, for the possibility of developing those feelings of empathy and of tenderness. You know, you see it in the movies of Ken Loach, when suddenly the British states cuts the welfare and makes cuts in the frame of legal work, and people have to work harder, and they don't have contracts anymore, and they have 0-hour contracts, and they are so precarious. And what you see in Ken Loach movies is that those people, they become extremely tensed. It destroys a family. It destroys a relationship with their wife, with their kids, with their friends. So political violence is also of the possibility of tenderness, I think. When I was a child, I thought there was one door between one class and the other. I thought the door between one class and the other was money, was access to money. Was okay, we don't have money, and the rich that we see on TV, they have money. And later on, and this is what I describe in my book, Changer Méthode, later on I realized that there was not one door between one class and the others, but 800 doors. Classes are about the way you talk, about the volume of your voice. Do you speak loud or do you speak with a lower voice? It's about the things you eat. Do you eat cheeseburger or do you eat fancy fish? It's about the music you do, you know. Do you do violin or do you do accordion? It's about the sport you practice. Do you do golf? Do you do tennis? Or do you do soccer like working class kids? And the class distinction is everywhere. And that's why it's so difficult to escape from one class and escape your social destiny, because you have to cross 800 doors. There are so many things you have to change, you have to let behind you. Not because you think that one class is better than the other. No, it's not the point. It's just a mean to survive. It's just a mean to survive. It's funny because when I started to publish my book, some people were telling, oh, so Édouard Louis says that the bourgeoisie is better and that we have to escape. I don't say that it's better. I say that in the working class milieu of my childhood, my brother died from alcohol at 38 years old. My cousin died in jail at 30 years old. My father could no longer work at 50 years old because he was a street sweeper, because he was working at the chain of the factory. Everywhere in Europe, including in Denmark, you have 50% more chances to die before 65 if you belong to working class than if you belong to the bourgeoisie. So it means that class is not symbolic. You don't escape because you think that one class is better than the other. You escape to survive. You escape not to die. I escaped not to die like my brother. I escaped not to be unable to walk at 50 like my father. And so that's why you change, not because you love the bourgeoisie. I don't love the bourgeoisie. But in this process of change, you meet all those doors, and the dominant class are strangely reproducing those doors, but at the same time they are blind to those doors. They will always say, no, I'm in favor of change. I'm in favor of change. If people want to change, it's beautiful. But then if you go to a fancy restaurant of the bourgeoisie and you talk very loud with a Northern France accent, like the one I had in my childhood, they will look at you and contempt you. So there is a gap between what people say about class and what people do about class. The way they pretend that they are in favor of emancipation and the way that they will reproduce the gaps. And this is where contempt of class is, in this kind of blindness to what people are reproducing themselves. It creates a deep sense of melancholy to belong to several classes. And this is the melancholy I've been trying to talk in my book Change, what it is to change your voice, the way you speak, the way you dress, the way you, in order to be able to escape and to survive. And this, of course, leaves traces in you. And this is not an easy subject, because when you come from the working class and you express your melancholy, people will always have the impression that you complain, and they will tell you, oh, but no, you escape, so why would you be melancholic? And I remember when I finished the first draft of my book, Change, I showed it to some friends. And I was talking in this book about the melancholy. And those friends told me, but why do you say you are melancholic? You publish books, you travel, why would you be sad? And for me, it was very violent, this impossibility to access melancholy, because I come from the working class. Whereas if you come from the bourgeoisie and you are melancholic, people call it poetry. There is a whole movement about that. There was a romanticism, there was also the German literature, there was Goethe, there was people expressing the melancholy, and we called it poetry. So it's also a political question. Who has access to melancholy? There is also an unequal access to melancholy in our societies that we don't see, because there is no political space for that. You can go in the street and say, I'm poor and I want that to change, I'm gay and I want that to change, I'm a woman and I want that to change. But you cannot go in the street and say, I suffer from melancholy because I come from a place where we had nothing and I'm now in a different place where the codes, the rules, the norms, the behaviors are so different and I'm lost in this. So I wrote also in order to provide a space for this political struggle for melancholy. Childhood has this very strange taste and structure, because it's very often an awful time that you miss, even if it was awful. You know, there was a word to describe the people who came from Eastern Germany after the fall of the Berlin Wall and the reunification of Germany. And this term was called nostalgia, which was nostalgia for the East. And the paradox of nostalgia is that people were in a society where they were not free. They didn't have political freedom. They were spied on. But they missed it because the state was paying an apartment for them, because they were being, in a way, taken care of in a problematic way, but they were. And it's the same thing that happened in childhood. You are not free. You cannot do what you want. Adults can impose you to everything they want. But the world takes care of you. You have food, you have a house, you have a bed, you have someone who cleans your clothes. And I think that it creates a strange nostalgia of childhood that can push us to miss even things that we hated. I hated my childhood and I miss it. I would give everything to go back to the childhood that I hated. And probably, which is even more strange, I would do anything for this childhood to happen exactly the same way. I would make the people who were calling me a faggot and assaulting me, I would make them do it again, because it's what saved me. It was saved me. It was pushed me to escape. I would not try to save Eddie from violence. I would be sad for him, but I would think, this violence is your key to freedom. And it's terrible. We should give people other keys to freedom, of course. But in my case, it was the condition for running away. I think that change is one of the most beautiful experience in human life. And what you see around you, if you talk to people, if you ask them questions, or even if you read literature, you will see that so many people want to change, want to escape something. They are frustrated by their job and they dream of escaping it. They are suffocating from their family. You have so many women who suffocate from parenting, taking care of the kids, and they want something else. You have working class people who want to escape poverty. They are not happy to be poor. They are not happy to eat bad food. They are not happy to be in a shitty apartment. And they want to escape. The desire to escape and to change is everywhere. If you read Proust, if you read Virginia Woolf, all those women trapped, even in the upper class, it's not only a class thing, it's everywhere. And what it means is that the desire to change is political, it's collective. But we tend to transform it and to translate it into an individual problem. You know, I want to change my job, I want to change my life, I'm frustrated, I'm going to go to therapy, or I'm going to do a program with my job to switch my profession and go somewhere else. But it should be addressed politically. And we know that it's possible. We know that the governments can do it. In Italy, for example, if the mafia wants to kill you because you denounce them, the state has a program where they give you other paper, a new name, a new place in another city, and they know programs to make you change. So why it is not something that we all have access to? Why don't we create a ministry of metamorphosis that would provide people to completely change their life? Because it's a political suffering as much as being a woman suffering from male domination, or being a gay person suffering from homophobia, or a black person suffering from racism. And those, eventually the government, when they are left-wing, will say, okay, we have to deal with that. They never deal with this issue of change, which is in fact crushing people's life as much as homophobia or racism. You have people like the mother of Peter Hanke in his book A Sorrow Beyond Dream, where she kills herself because she cannot change her life, she cannot escape it. So not only I want to change and always change, but I want that to be considered a political issue and not to be being put into the shadows of individual desires. I wrote previously a first book about my mother, escaping my father after 20 years with him, 20 years of abusive relationship. Then she escaped my father. And a few years after, one night she called me, it's the opening scene of Flygte. She called me and she said to me, the man I'm living with is doing the same than your father was doing. He's drinking, and when he's drunk, he insults me. He's violent with me. And she had to escape again. And I had to write this book because for me, this is violence. And this is the violence of violence. The violence of violence is the coming back of violence. If we knew that violence was something you could get rid of like this, then violence wouldn't be the same. It would be easier. But when you enter violence, for example, as a gay person or as a woman, you have to live with the idea that it can come back. If someone assaults you in the street, you have to live with the idea that it can come back, that it might come back, that it will likely come back. So what do? When you're a gay person, you don't hold the hand of your partner in the street. You don't kiss him in the street. If you're a woman, you go in the street, you say, okay, can I walk alone at this time of the night? Can I wear this kind of dress? Can I wear this kind of hair? Can I put makeup or not? Because you know that the violence of violence is its possible potential return.